Now, Saturn has quite a few rings, but just 3 main rings. And those 3 main rings are the largest rings and also the brightest rings, the rings that we can see from a distance with the naked eye. And that's rings A, B, and C, with the A ring being the furthest away from the planet and the C ring being the closest. And the space between these rings are called divisions, the gaps between each ring. And again, Saturn has a lot of rings, so there's also a lot of divisions or gaps. But the 2 largest divisions are between the A ring and the B ring. You have the Cassini division in the B ring, which is the largest division or the largest gap. And then in the A ring, you have the Encke division. Now, in his book, The Ringmakers of Saturn, Norman Bergrun pointed out some of the odd things that he noticed while looking at the images from the Voyager probe. And basically, he noticed that when looking at the same exact section of Saturn's rings from 2 separate probes, the rings looked different. The same exact section that was photographed by Voyager 1 looked a lot different when it was photographed by Voyager 2. It actually looked like the rings were expanding or growing from one image to the next. So he kept looking deeper into all the photographs of Saturn from the Cassini probe and the Voyager probe. And he started to pinpoint what he thought to look like these bright objects. He called them luminous sources hanging around the rings of Saturn. And the more he analyzed these things, the more he noticed that wherever he saw these luminous sources, he also saw these long, narrow, bright lines. And they looked like they had some type of structure to them. And he started to propose that these luminous sources or these light sources were coming from these structures and were like some type of residue coming off of these structures that seemed to be attaching themselves to the rings of Saturn. And as he started analyzing them more, he started to notice even more of the structure of these objects, and that it was almost shaped like a cylinder. And that's when he started referring to these things as vehicles. And because he was always spotting them near the edges of the rings of Saturn, and because of that drastic change in the size of the rings of Saturn that he had seen between Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, he started to theorize that either these vehicles were forming the rings of Saturn, siphoning material from the rings of Saturn, or both. But he definitely strongly believed that there was a link between these vehicles and the divisions in Saturn's rings, and specifically the 2 main divisions, Cassini and Encke. And so with all that in mind, he started referring to these things as electromagnetic vehicles, aka the Ringmakers of Saturn. And because of everything that he had come across in his data, he pretty much believed that anywhere where you could find rings around a planet, you could also find these vehicles. And he believed that there was a good chance that they were all over the solar system. Now, eventually he did an interview about his findings, and this thing ended up going viral. A lot of people have seen it. And in the interview, he was asked if he had come across any evidence of there being actual sentient life inside these vehicles.
From Project Camelot, we are here with Norm Bergrun. He was with NACA, which was the early precursor of NASA.
Yes.
And he also worked for Ames Research. He has also worked for Lockheed Martin before it was Lockheed Martin. And he has written a book called The Ringmakers of Saturn. And so when you're talking about the craft in the rings of Saturn, you're talking about something huge, right?
Yes.
Much bigger than we could even conceive of, I understand. What is it? I don't know, what was it, 70,000 square feet?
I could, in looking down on the rings, I could see parallel lines crossing the ring, all the rings at once. Mm-hmm. That's about as long as you can get them.
That's incredible.
But I could tell that those lines demarked the outside of an object. And that's how I came up with the scale I present in there of different lengths of these things.
Well, did we build it?
Pardon?
Did we build it? Who built it? The craft?
I don't know who built it, but what I found out is these things inhabit Saturn. That's where I first discovered them, and they're proliferating. They're now at Uranus and Jupiter. Wherever you see some rings now, why, that's one of these.
You see the craft?
Yeah, I call it a ring maker. Yeah.
Okay, you call it a ring maker.
Yeah, and I can say it's electromagnetic because I could identify streamline patterns with respect to it that I knew were what we call potential lines, and that says it was electrical. Somebody comes along and says, well, now where would you manufacture one that's 2.5 Earth lengths long? And that's a hard question to answer. However, if you think of it in terms of its living entity, it's just another kind of thing that we've got in our universe. And it can grow and grow and grow and grow.
Okay, but if there are craft, there are beings.
Okay, people have asked me about, I call them vehicles, okay?
Right.
Now, I did not call them objects. That was too neuter for me.
Okay.
I had a Stanford professor said you ought to call them objects. No. They have all of the qualities of a vehicle. They can move. You know, they're just like a missile or anything like that. So that much we can say about them, for sure.
Okay.
So I'm calling it a vehicle.
Okay. So are you not positing the idea that those vehicles contain, beings who are, maybe like us?
Yeah, I only go along with government images. And if you want to know about people kind of thing, there is the ship that picked up the Voyager capsule at Alameda Naval Shipyard, and they have a picture there of I think it's the Apollo flight that Buzz and Neil were on. But anyway, there is one image there that shows black people getting off.
So people with dark skin getting off.
Not dark, black.
Black skin.
Really black. Yeah.
Were they tall?
Yes.
Very tall?
Yeah.
How tall? Do you know?
Well, they got out the doorway. I don't know how high that is, but
Well, what?
it's safe. 7 feet would be probably a conservative estimate.
Have you heard about Clark McClellan's statement about that?
No.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Have you ever been in touch with him?
No.
No?
I have tried to stay independent and not be affected by others' opinions.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that we're communicating with them? Have you had any evidence of that?
Oh, no. You
No?
know, we are not capable of doing that. SETI has tried to communicate with extraterrestrials, and they haven't done it yet. They have chosen the type of person, the type of entity that they want to communicate with is somebody that knows how to build radios.
Right.
That constrains them in their thinking immensely.
Now, eventually, when the Cassini probe was sent to Saturn in 1997, it was able to pick up more detailed images of the planet, with it being a lot more advanced than Voyager. And when they captured the Cassini images of Saturn's rings, they saw that what was causing the divisions in the rings was actually Saturn's moons. Because, you know, Saturn has a lot of moons. There's at least 82 that they know of so far. And some of these moons actually create these divisions in the rings, usually by pulling different pieces of the rings into their gravitational field. And remember, one of the two main divisions where Norman Bergrun said he saw the evidence of those vehicles, the Encke division in Saturn's A ring. They also refer to it as Encke's gap. And remember, this is a division in one of Saturn's three main rings. And what they found through Cassini was that Encke's division, or Encke's gap, was being caused by the moon Pan. It's actually located inside of the gap, and it just kind of orbits around this part of the rings and keeps this gap open, this 200-mile wide division. And apparently this thing is moving fast. They estimate it to be orbiting around Saturn at about 42 miles per hour. And again, as it moves through, it keeps this division open and creates the Encke gap. And NASA is actually referring to this thing as the god of the gap, because of course it's named after the god Pan. And they say that they named it after the god Pan because he was a god of the wild and a shepherd, and the moon Pan kind of acts like a shepherd, forcing all those ring particles out of the way to create that division. But really, think about what they're saying. The moon Pan is creating the Encke division. Remember, Pan, the goat, and Encke, the fish. The goat, fish, the astrological symbol for Capricornus, which takes you back to Saturn. And remember, the goatfish is also the symbol of Encke, one of the oldest gods in the Sumerian pantheon. And according to the Sumerian mythology, the god responsible for creating human beings. Now, again, think about it. Pan is causing a division in Encke. And when you look at Pan, Pan itself, out of all of Saturn's moons, Pan is one of the smallest moons. It's literally only 8 miles wide, but it still has this huge effect on Saturn's rings. And it's also one of the most oddly shaped moons. It's got that weird shape to it. Some people say it looks like a walnut or a ravioli, but really take a good look at this thing. To me, it looks a lot like a mutated version of Saturn. It looks like the planet surrounded by its rings in a much more mutated form. I mean, put the moon Pan side by side with the planet Saturn, and you can see it. It's like a mutated version of Saturn. The spherical planet, the rings, it's got all those same features, just in a mutated form. But it's got that exact same formation to it. Now, remember again what they're saying. Pan is causing the Encke division. And remember, Pan is going to lead you back to Satan. And all of this stuff dealing with Satan and Saturn, the 3 sixes, the black sun, even the sabbatic goat, the Baphomet, all of this stuff is going to always lead you back to the oppression of black people. And where did that oppression come from? White people. And of course, we know race is not real. It's an illusion, a very strong illusion, but it is an illusion. And how do we get these quote unquote races? From mutations within the human DNA. We are all mutations of the original human beings. And quote unquote white people are nothing more than mutations of quote unquote black people. Remember, you've got that MC1R gene that produces eumelanin. or black and brown skin. And when that MC1R gene is blocked, you get pheomelanin, a mutation in the human genome that ultimately leads to white skin. And then look at that moon, Pan, again. It's like a mutation of Saturn. And this mutation of Saturn is creating the Encke division. And remember again, Encke in the mythology is the creator of human beings. So it's literally like they're saying Pan, or this mutation, is causing a division in the human race, black versus white, the divide of the races. And this whole thing is being driven by the energy of the god Pan, that satanic low vibrational energy. And when you look at the symbol of the goatfish, you can see that the goat is at the head and the fish is at the tail. So it's pretty much the same message. Pan is ruling Encke, or in other words, Satan is ruling humanity through division. And remember, with the theory of Yakub, you have that idea that this wasn't by accident, that this division was literally manufactured. And remember, with Encke, you've got those two separate creation stories, the black-headed people and mankind. And then you've got Norman Bergrun saying that the Ringmakers of Saturn are creating the Encke division and also the Cassini division. And when NASA sent that probe through the Cassini division, they figured out that it was the moon Mimas causing the division. Now, Mimas isn't even that close to the Cassini division. And it's another really small moon, just like Pan. But it has such a strong gravitational pull that it actually creates this gap from a distance. And remember, it's creating the largest gap in Saturn's rings. And Mimas is pretty popular because it looks just like the Death Star from Star Wars. But what's interesting is that Mimas was apparently not even discovered until 1980. And Star Wars was released in 1977. And so, the official word is that it was just this coincidence that the Death Star just so happened to look a lot like this moon of Saturn, Mimas. But it's crazy. If you look at this moon and you look at the Death Star, the resemblance is undeniable. So if they didn't base the Death Star off of Mimas, then that's a pretty huge coincidence. And remember, in the original Star Wars, the Death Star is built by the Empire, which is led by Darth Vader. Now, remember, when Star Wars was originally released, it was released as a single film. It was a low budget movie, and there was no anticipation of this thing turning into what it became. And so that original story was supposed to be it. And remember, that original story was about this powerful Force user, Darth Vader, dressed in all black, leading an army of stormtroopers going from planet to planet, attempting to conquer each planet. And then when the second movie, The Emperor Strikes Back, came out and they introduced the snowtroopers, it's like they were just giving it to us in plain sight. Now, some of you might think I'm reaching with this one, and some of you might be seeing what I'm seeing. But I think the key is the Death Star. That links all of this back to Saturn, the Ringmakers, and everything else. Remember, again, Shani has that characteristic of testing you, literally creating obstacles and adversaries for you to work your way through and to continue to grow and to ascend. And now just think about that from the aspect of the Ringmakers creating divisions in Saturn's rings. And again, Mimas, aka the Death Star, is creating the largest division in Saturn's rings. Now remember, they recorded those radio emissions coming from Saturn.